One thing many people consider when they have children is investing for them to try and build up capital for them in the future to help them later in life. It's one of the things people want to do for people that they love. We get asked about it quite a lot, and I think it's a really interesting topic, and there's a lot to discuss around it. Today in the video, I'm going to discuss some of the practical things around it, like the tax wrappers you might use and the implications that has. But I'm also going to talk about this, a framework you might want to think about to try and help you divide money between what you spend with children and what you invest for them. And I'm going to cover some of the psychological impacts of investment that can help people in their development and understanding of the world. The first thing you should think about with any investment is to make sure you're clear with what your objective is. So if you're investing for children, you're giving them money with the hope that it will build up to become worth quite a lot more over time, and then they can do something useful with that, I would imagine. So, the three areas that I think most people would think about for saving would be helping with the costs of university, helping with buying a first home, or helping people save for a comfortable retirement. As odd as that sounds for a newborn baby, it will come around eventually. So if you stand back and think about what investing is a way of trying to make more money from your money. And the best way of measuring that, I think, is in what's known as real terms. So a return after you've stripped out inflation. So how much will you be able to buy in inflation adjusted terms in the future? So a reasonable estimate of returns that you could get after inflation and costs might be about 4% for investments. So if you invest for 20 years with a 4% annual return, you're going to make about 2.1 times your money. If you invest for 50 years, you'll make 7.1 times. So like with anything that you're compounding, the longer you leave it, the more attractive it will be. Now, this is important, firstly, just to understand what the impacts of investing would be. The money will become worth more in real terms in the future, but also it helps you to think a little bit more about how you might want to invest it. When you're investing for such a long period of time, the risk of investment actually declines because the impact of volatility is less important. If you can imagine, there are bumps in the road rather than something which is dramatic. So someone who is saving for their own retirement later in life really should be much more concerned about volatility than somebody who's saving for a 20, 30, 40 year period in the future. Having thought about that, it is quite likely for many people that the attitude to risk for this pool of money would be different to their own attitude to risk. So if you imagine grandparents saving for grandchildren, the grandparents may have quite a low attitude to risk with their savings, but might actually have quite a high attitude to risk for their grandchildren. And in many cases, that's probably going to be more suitable for the grandchildren to invest in that way. So being clear about objectives is really important, and it does help you make probably better decisions about how the money's invested and where. The next area I would think about is the practical stuff around the tax wrappers that you might use. So if you're just doing if you're doing an investment for anything before the retirement of the child that you're thinking about, you really are probably going to want to use junior ISAs. Now, there's a very generous £9,000 a year allowance. So if you're well off and you can afford to gift a lot of money to your children, you could use that to build up a significant sum over the years. A junior ISA works very much like a normal ISA. The gains that you have in it are tax-free. The income will be tax-free. And you've got a wide choice of funds that you can use, and the costs are very reasonable. So a junior ISA is a really attractive investment. Another thing to consider with a junior ISA is you can merge a child trust fund into it. So if you have an older child that you're looking at who perhaps got given a child trust fund while they were government policy, the costs of the child trust fund and the fund availability is probably less attractive. So it is worthwhile doing that as well. If you want to set up a junior ISA, merge any existing child trust funds into it as well. If you're considering investing to help the child have a comfortable retirement, which despite the fact it seems so far away will happen, you'll maximize the compounding effect, so the return that you'll get on your money, as I discussed before. And you'll also get additional return from the tax advantages and the contribution the government effectively makes for the child. So you can invest up to £3,600 a year this way, and 720 of that 3,600 would be a government contribution, even though the child is not likely to be a taxpayer. So you actually need to invest just under 2,900 to get the 3,600 working for you. The downside, of course, with any pension is that you can't access it until you're 55, and that really is a long way away. But eventually, most people, of course, are going to get there, and when they do, I think they'd be very glad that were able to invest so early and benefit from compounding in such a dramatic way. So I would, despite the fact that it seems odd, I would really encourage people to think about that as something that's worthwhile doing as part of the savings goal. An area that people don't consider that I also think is important is some of the sort of personal development and psychological impacts of having investments. So in order to make investments work, you need to use some skills which are really important generally in life. So patience. The money will effectively just be in place for quite a long time. And actually, it's that time itself which makes it work for you. So being aware of it and having the discipline and patience to leave it to do what it needs to do is a general life lesson that I think you can absorb by osmosis from having investments. So that I think is quite nice. I mean, there's an aspect about how the world works, which I think most children would have very little exposure to. And having investments is a great vehicle to have conversations about it. So your money's likely to be invested globally. Most people would do that. So you become aware of the different parts of the world and the stock markets that they have, even if loosely you do. So I would, if I was investing for children, I would actually have conversations with them about the money and where it is. Underlying all investments is the idea about profit and growth and these things that are so important in day-to-day life. And actually having an understanding of them will help. I mean, I know myself when I was growing up, my mum and dad both ran their own business and they used to talk about business all the time. Actually, their parents both of them had run their own businesses, and they talked about that. And I and my brother have both ended up running our own businesses. I think these things do impact you. So I think having an investment and talking about investments makes you more aware about profit and business and what's going on in the world and the global nature of things. And that can only help because they have an active interest in it. So these softer effects are something that it's quite worthwhile, I think. It isn't just about the money and what you can do with it. I think it's a gentle introduction and a head start into how the world works. The last thing I want to talk about today is a framework for thinking about investing and how you decide how much to give to children to invest and how much you use for other things. So I think the best way to look at this is to divide money up into what you spend today and what you invest for the future. It sounds really simplistic, but let me explain. So if you're thinking about things that are beyond the day-to-day needs, the basic needs, you're thinking about the other stuff, you will spend a lot of money on children to help them to develop and to have fun. The purpose of life is fun. So how much money do you want to spend on experiences and things that you do together and nice meals? And how much do you want to spend on developments for the child, hobbies, activities, whatever that is? There are endless things that you can do that help you to develop as a person. And what would your budget be for that? And then actually, do you have an additional budget that you'd want to use for long-term goals and investing? They are quite different. But if you think about it in that way, I think you're probably quite likely to be able to strike the balance yourself that works for you of money that you'd spend today to maximize fun and personal development, and money that you'd put away for the future to maximize the benefits that they'll have later. Generally speaking, in financial planning, I think it's better to think of money almost like water, so it's level as much as possible. It's normally a mistake to front load all of your expenditure and live a high life only to be really struggling for money later. And similarly, it's a mistake to live overly harshly today in order to have a good life in this period that you're imagining in the future. It is better to balance it out. So I think naturally, if people think about it, they probably will want to have some balance in terms of what they do to help the child that they love in their life. But I think dividing it up into this framework is useful. So think about what you want to spend on fun and personal development support, and what you want to gift in terms of investments to allow that child, when they grow up, to do things like fund a university, buy a house, or have a comfortable retirement. I hope you found the video interesting and useful today. I just want to remind you that I have been discussing, even if indirectly, investments. So whenever you think about investments, you must remember that your capital is at risk. Thank you.